Jem, in his magnificence, kind of hijacked that conference with his deep adaptation presentation. And Gail Bradbrook was a dear friend of mine. So when I got home from the conference, utterly shaken and stirred and devastated by the science that Jem revealed, and primarily because as a mother, what he was saying was that my children were probably really unlikely to experience a full adulthood. Yeah.
Welcome to Love in Action at Caapi Cottage in Dominica in the Eastern Caribbean. And today we have the enormous privilege of being able to have a chat with Skeena Rathor, who is a co-founder of Extinction Rebellion, the ecological and climate justice movement. And she is also responsible for finding of the vision of XR. And so Skeena, first of all, just tell us where you are right now.
Thank you, Jessica. I'm feeling without, looking at the greenery behind you, the colours. But I am looking out at my slope of my garden, which backs onto the church. I'm in Stroud in the UK, and it's a holy place also because Stroud is the birth home of XR, of ecocide as well, Stop Ecocide, Polly Higgins's work, and many other creative movements and springs of life.
Before we get into where Extinction Rebellion is at, I'm sure some people don't know what Extinction Rebellion is, what the movement is all about. And I would also like to hear about you and your passion and how you came to be a part of this movement.
Thank you, Jessica. Who am I? My who-ness. I'm a Kashmiri origin, Sufi heritage Kashmiri, from Jammu Kashmir, which is hosts it's called the City of Sufis. Yeah, it really informs my who. My dad introduced me to community organising at 9 years of age. I grew up on a council working class estate in London, and he took me to the cooperative meetings, and that was that. And then by 15, I was politically active. By 17, I was in an elected office as a union politics, and student union politics, and then it just went on and on. With the XR piece, I was working for the Joe Cox Women in Leadership program and wanting to rewrite their leadership program. And I was an elected councillor here in Stroud, and I attended the Poetics of Leadership run by Jem Bendell at Cumbria University. And to all intents and purposes, Jem, in his magnificence, kind of hijacked that conference with his deep adaptation presentation, is how it felt to me, right? I'm not sure he would describe it as that at all, but co-founded a community called Politics Kitchen. And I was really dedicating some energy to trying to bring heart intelligence and deep listening into politics, compassion into politics. And I had been working with Rising Up and Compassionate Revolution before that. Had made some pledges. So and Gail Bradbrook was a dear friend of mine. So when I got home from the conference, utterly shaken and stirred and devastated by the science that Jem revealed, and primarily because as a mother, what he was saying was that my children might not experience a full adult, would probably really unlikely to experience a full adulthood. Yeah. So if I had three girls, and I saw their life flash before my eyes. It was just a moment of horror, terror and shock and disbelief and all the many emotions that, you know, come when someone puts a death sentence together for humanity, and it includes your children, right? So I went to see my friend Gail, and she was like, yeah, I have been messaging you for a couple of months. And she just said, thank God you're here, because she said the word, I remember her words were something like, because no one's listening. And I've been praying for help, and bless her heart. She had such courage, right, to stand there initially. And I just decided that I wanted to stand in it too, and face it for, and how could I carry on regardless, as a mother and as a politician and as a campaigner and as an activist and as a heart, you know, someone who talks about the, you know, heart intelligence and wants to embody that. How could I not? So that's, and then XR. So that was September, and then in October we launched XR.
And the year was
2018. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we made our declaration on October the 31st. And then we had our first rebellion. And I, for all of us, we kind of, you know, anyone that enters as an XR rebel or an XR activator or activist, you find your way, right? And we all found our, and my way was to initially think about the spirit, the sacred aspect of the work, and to think about our vision for what were we mobilizing towards, you know, in the deepest ways possible, and work around that, create work towards that. So
wow.
I founded a vision circle and team, and then we just, and political circle as well. As a politician, I was in that camp as well, and then relationship circle, and you know, in circles we mushroomed, like we just went bam. There was a zeitgeist, and April 2019, our rebellion, it was very beautiful and quite a visionary rebellion, and I think people were really drawn, and also the authorities were really in that shock. They didn't know how to respond, so we, you know, some of that initial prosperity or flourishing was that meeting the unknown, and in a beautiful way, and so it was allowed to explode.
Wow. Oh, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing your story. It comes from such a deep place. How you came to be one of the co-founders, I think that's an incredible story, because it ties closely with the deep adaptation, and that already was stirring. And so much seems to be centered around what was going on in the UK intellectually, and then in terms of politics. I want to just narrow into what the demands are for Extinction Rebellion, because some people don't know, aren't clear on that there are actual set of demands, and maybe talk a little bit about the philosophical underpinnings of this theory of change that we hear a lot about, many theories of change, or and civil disobedience, and how XR is articulating that.
So the three demands are to tell the truth. So this satyagraha, you know, of truth force and truth power that the nonviolent movement knows really well through people like Gandhi. That's our first demand, right? To really organize ourselves around that and feel it and name it and request it. And it feels like the most powerful demand, if, you know, for me, mix it with love, and then you've got something irresistible, right? And then the second demand is around net zero by 2025, you know, deliberately kind of working with what might be called impossible, but knowing that everything is possible, and actually to meet anywhere near the depth of the crisis, that's the truth, that's the reality. It's a reality statement, you know. And then the third demand is for a citizens' assembly, for deliberative and participative democracy, you know, for the expansion of more democracy. What could that mean? And knowing that actually that it's about there's a relinquishment piece, isn't there, in deep adaptation? Well, there's a relinquishment of how we've done power over politics and power hungry politics that leaves most powerless. So, you know, there's a reconciliation in the CAs that's really important, I think, which is another R of deep adaptation. And these demands, by the way, in the recent strategy have changed slightly, and that's for the movement at the moment, which really speaks to your second part, which is about theories of change. The movement at the moment is being strategically led by an action focus, and this is about this theory of change around the 3.5%, which Erica Chenoweth has done some research around, into what creates revolution. Well, you know, there's a possibility that you only need 3.5% of the population, although she did her research, right, in non-liberal, generally, you know, democracies, and not, you know, parts of the world that were had tyrannical tyrannical rule, and what has happened is, and she has named some of this, is that research has been reduced and oversimplified, in my humble opinion, because when people think they're free and you live in a so-called liberal democracy, it's not the same formula can't, you know, and there couldn't. It's always circumstance based, right? And it's always about the dynamics present right there in the moment. And of course, research is useful from people like Erica and can give us clues. But we've been organizing around that as the dominant theory of change. Other theories have been kind of in there trying to have a voice. I think that we've said at one point, we really did say in a strategy, we've got an ecology of theories of change, but mostly they haven't been worked with and realized, which I think is very sad. And so myself and Gail Bradbrook and some others, Stu Basden and Kofi Esther from our International Solidarity Network, and Corbina, our XR Youth, a number of us are stepping into a new iteration, and we're calling it the Being the Change Affinity Network. And that it's around our vision, right, for restoration, transformative reparations, transformative adaptations and deep adaptations, repair, you know, reweaving the human family for the protection of life and earth repairs. That's the Being the Change work now. And
beautiful.
At the moment, it's just a parallel part of XR. It's still connected, but it may, and it will probably grow into something else. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. I'm thinking about some of the comments that I've heard from you on other interviews where you're saying the science is very important, but the science and the facts are not what is going to motivate people to change, motivate the shift, that the shift has to come from something much deeper, something much more heartfelt, a mindset. And you used a phrase in one of the interviews. You said the climate crisis is a crisis of relationships. And can you just tell us, in your view, where we are in this predicament And is our relationships really the central issue to resolving, to finding our way through this?
Thank you, Jessica. Oh, I think so. Oh, I think so. I think, really it's not my thinking, it's the thinking of Audre Lorde and Bell Hooks, and Mickey Cashton and Victor, Victor, there's so many names I want to appreciate of people. For 90 to 95% of the existence of Homo sapiens, or our history as a species, we lived in hunter-gatherer bands, right? Mm-hmm. And we were enculturated into a felt sense of abundance, right? Of love, yeah, because there was what Darsha Novaris calls an evolved nest. Her work is amazing, by the way. And we were connected to allo mothering. We had primary caregivers and other mothers, and we had, and this is still how the San Bushmen live, right? And still some other very great indigenous tribes in the world. It was matrifocal in its organizing principle, generally, and something disrupted that to such a degree. And was it a natural disaster? What happened? We don't really know the story. Some of this is like, it's not science. This story of the rupture, this Garden of Eden story, right, where we get thrown out of the Garden of Paradise. It's just something happened and we know it. That's why these stories have been told, because we now have a felt sense of scarcity, mm-hmm. right? We live in this paradigm of scarcity. Mickey calls it scarcity, separation, and powerlessness. Mm-hmm. I would add soullessness to that, right? And the Western whiteness mindset and heart set operates in that paradigm most of the time. And it's created sickness. It's created wetiko, right? This insatiable, the hungry ghost, the insatiable hunger, because we're in a felt sense of scarcity and separation, right? In separation and scarcity, I'm alone. I feel alienated. There's an estrangement. There's a disconnection. I have to cope. I have to be in disassociation, right? And there's a crisis I'm in, like that. I'm in a nervous system crisis. My whole system that is here to understand my relationship with the world, my connection, is in crisis. Right? And then, of course, from that place of crisis, I can be violent. I can be destructive. I will be destructive, right? And I can have this insatiability. I want to distract myself from the pain, right? I just can't be in it. So there's addiction, there's distraction, there's all kinds of behaviors that I will need to play out just to feel like I can survive, And so it's a crisis, and it's a crisis between us, because how do I stay in connection to you then if I'm in this emergency state, this sympathetic nervous system, state a lot of the time? How do I be with the beauty of life? Because to be in the beauty and see the beauty and feel it, you've got to be in connection, right? So how do I connect to the earth and the great mother there? And how do I stay in healthy relationships or create healthy relationships? It's just like so hard. Instead, I'm going to exploit and extract and power over, right? Which is what patriarchal culture does. And then I'm going to create colonization, which is what happened with the Sumerians, the first great colonizers, and then the Romans took it to a whole new level. And actually, we've taken it to a whole new level. The Anglo-Saxons, take a whole new level, neocolonialism, right? And now it's a whole new level with the great, the mega billionaires, who own, I think, between 3 and 5 own as much wealth as 50% of the poorest half of humanity, like a few people, like less than few people on a hand. I mean, that is like patriarchal culture on steroids. Like, you know, it's like obscene. We can't even. And it's, so we're somewhere between this mass suicide and mass manslaughter, because there's a crisis in how we can relate and be together and be with the earth. So that's what I talk about in the work of co-liberation.
It's such a huge dilemma, such a huge predicament. Do you, Skeena, in this moment, think there's a chance to overcome, to actually break through that with all of what you've just described? You still think we have time, and do you think we have the agency, and how do you even imagine that could actually happen? What?
Yeah. So this thing about time, no one knows. So it's like, okay, present moment reality, you know, knowing that actually, yes, science is going, look, the mother is like ready to shake us off, you know, but actually any second now, no one knows, right? No one knows. You know, when Jem has tried to offer some kind of predictions around societal collapse and, you know, the collapse of some of the exponential tipping points, and you know, you've got Johan Rockström's work around the planetary boundaries, but then, you know, tipping cascades, and it's like, it's so complex, right? And we can, I just actually think science is so limited in its understanding of time, what time we have. So if we act like the emergency is now, not, you know, that we don't have 5 years, we don't have 10 years, we don't have, you know, it's not about 3.5 degree rise in 50 years, right? It's now. Yeah. Genocidal and ecocidal economics operate now. You know, there are 5 million children in slavery, mostly brown and black now, right? It's now, like, you know, if there's a child being abused, the crisis is now, right?
And the mass extinction event is now.
It's now. It's now. There's ecosystem collapse now. The soils are at loss now, right? The Amazon and the Congo Basin, it's being taken apart now, right? So it's like, okay, we need to now. And the thing is, like yes, we can do this now. Because in some ways we no longer have a choice. You know, we you know, it's right here, right now. It's realizing, it's going, oh, it is right here, right now. And do I want to live? And my worry is there's so much deep disconnection. Actually, I don't know. Some of us will want to live. You know, it's really painful to be alive. But then the human being is, where there's longing, there's life, right? Mm-hmm. And life has a longing for itself. And so it's the cultivation of longing again. You know, can we as a Sufi, a lot of our work is about the heart breaking open to hold the whole universe, you know, a heart broken open enough that can hold the whole universe. And it's can our hearts break up? Yes, I believe we can. And so, and then there is a grief as a superpower to take us through that process, because there we find our longing for love and life, right? And I suppose I'm being quite abstract, as you know, my own whiteness Western mind can do. Practically, can we do it? Well, absolutely. This is what about being the change work is. It's about connecting the pluriversality of intelligence the many ways of knowing, plurality, meaning the many ways of knowing and being, both countable and uncountable, and the many visions within that, right? If we can connect that from the global majority world, which in my humble opinion has actually some advantage in its intelligence because of it's closer to being it than we are here in the Western world, right? And living it. If we can connect that to us again, if we can reweave the human family, which I believe we can, right? And everything becomes local islands of sanity and sanctity is how I describe it sometimes, that are thinking globally, you know? So that's decolonization, right? That's the co-liberation experience that we can all step into. And I think people are ready, actually. I think the environmental movement and a lot of progressive left politics, which I know is quite blurry now, what does that mean? But I think actually from the crisis being so deep, you know, that word crisis also meaning turning. Yeah, I feel us in the turning. That might be my bubble that I operate in. But actually, you know, if I connect to my working class community friends still in London, like my neighbours, my old neighbours, and I have done recently in trying to make a film with them, I feel already, I feel them longing for love, you know, I feel the longing is there. It's just a relationships again, it's up to those of us that have the privilege to be able to create that reconnection and that deep collaboration, the relationships to do that work now.
Yes.
And I think we can. And I think maybe it's a false hope and I'm in my denial, as Jem might say, but I, you know, as a mother, I can't let go of that we will, you know, because I can't think that our children could be abandoned like that, because that's what we'd be doing. We'd be abandoning billions of children.
Of course, that's really beautifully articulated. I want to go back to looking at the actions of Extinction Rebellion, if you wouldn't mind giving us, because when I think of Extinction Rebellion, I just think of this color and I think of this almost festival atmosphere, and I think of the use of art and theater, and it seems to be such a central role in the movement. Can you speak a little bit about that? How is art, and is this another way to engage people, and do you think it's more effective than, as we were talking about, the science and the statistics of what's happening?
Yeah, thank you, Jessica, and thank you for appreciating the colour and the vibrancy that you're naming. I think that a lot of our artistry is born in that, in our creativity, right? In our capacity for creativity and imagination. And there's something in that, I think, for our co-liberation overall, that, you know, people have also said, you know, we're struggling in a crisis of imagination. And so when you see it then on the streets, this imaginative way to be in disobedience, it's like, whoa, you know, it's quite a sight for sore eyes, isn't it? It's captivating, it's really compelling. And yeah, I'm so chuffed that so many amazing people who, you know, activate through Extinction Rebellion have that creativity and that I just plugging in my laptop. They have the capacity, and I think it's part of the culture. I'm going to turn on the plug.
Sure.
So if you think about our principles and values and how we organize in a decentralized way, in sociocratic ways, and it's called a self-organizing system, then it leaves people to be freer. I still think there's a lot of work to do, but freer in their creativity and their sovereign purpose, right? Because it's always a creative force. That's, you know, our reason for being here. Every single living thing has a deep reason, right? Deep purpose for being here. And when that is unleashed, oh my, and this is why I think we can do it. It's just a process of unleashing and co-liberating that with each other.
Yeah. Wow.
You've answered some of my questions against, is winning possible, and XR's focus now going forward. We're past the 3-year anniversary, and you're saying now that as a vision, as a co-finder of the vision, you're looking at shifting the vision slightly to be more holistic. It reminds me, we just, as I mentioned, we had an interview with one of the forest defenders at Fairy Creek, and she's from
First Nation and on Vancouver Island.
Yeah.
And she described the camps where the blockades are happening as sort of these experimental moments for creating community and for taking care of one another, the singing, the shared purpose. And I'm wondering, I've heard similar things about
XR experience, that people come for the rebellion, but they explore and they realize so much more. Can you talk a little bit about that? What sort of community making goes on in XR?
Thank you. I think being in rebellion actively with your whole body is like an initiation. It's like a threshold for us, because we all go, to some, wherever you are, the discontent, right, is real. And we spend like most of the day trying to push that feeling aside and under, right? And then the thing about physically turning up to go, to be with it, like the discomfort, the discontent, right? And go, I'm going to just physically put my body into saying it how it is, because I don't want that. I don't want this violent, destructive system that makes me feel shit most of the time, right? So I'm going to say no. I'm going to put my body's going to say no, and and what we really want to do now, especially now with being the change work, is put our body into a yes, and go, right, so I'm going to create the more, as Charles Eisenstein says, the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible, right? I'm going to be in that creation work. So I think that when we come together, as they have done in Canada, and they're doing all over the world, and I just want to say for a moment, I just want to just remember the courageous work that's going on, right, in parts of Africa and India and South America, the folks in Ghana right now and what they're facing. We have just been in touch with a friend who's with a project in South Africa with young women who are relying on this school to give them their meal for the day, but they're receiving education, they're receiving self-defense classes, right? It's all these amazing little pieces of resistance work. The 43 million women involved in the Godumbashri movement in India, right? Motherists just organizing economically and politically, like incredible work going on. in the world, right? And they know it. You come together, and you know, the civil rights movement, they talk about it being about convivial assemblies, you know, where you come together and there is shared resonance through your truth and your heart, and there's food and there's dance and there's song and there's togetherness, there's live 3D togetherness. What could be more beautiful and joyful for a human soul than that, right? So that's
it's beautiful. And
all of these movements and all of these actions, it's almost, and I've heard the term, we could create a movement of movements. We are all doing these different work in different parts of the world, but how to, as you're talking about getting this critical mass and having this shift of enough of us into this new way of relating, into these new relationships with each other and the planet. And that's really seems to be the key, right? To have it swell enough so that it can tip over. We talk about tipping points. And I know XR talks about that, when you get to that tipping point of enough people move over to this new paradigm. And
that's it. There's a switch. There's a switching point, you know.
You have an idea of where you think we are, and I'm sure you have these conversations with your colleagues.
Do you know, Jessica, I'm starting to notice that when I make assessments of like some kind of, like, you know, a measurement around, and I'm just kind of going, why am I doing it? How does it help me? You know, you're asking a fair enough question, right? You're asking a completely fair, because that we want to be able to find, well, you're asking a question around safety is what it feels like. It's like, when I ask that question, like, I'm asking from that place in me that wants to find or inquire about, how safe am I? You know, how safe am I? What can I expect? And the reality is that we're not safe, you know, and so I don't know. I don't even know if that, you know, that question, like, I don't know if I can be in that question, and I still appreciate it, right? And I'm still like, I'm still going to be, if someone can tell me, and I'm like, I'm still wanting to know, just like you are, right? But I can't live in that. I can't live in that question. I feel like a lot of the distraction for me has been in that question, you know, around measuring our progress. Because actually I can just, all I need to do is look around me to know where I am, to know where we are, you know. Not enough has happened. I do feel closer to it, because many more people are willing to talk about patriarchal culture and colonization and racism than they were 3 years ago with me. Many more. So I think we're closer, you know, but I can only talk from my reality. I can't talk about anything.
Well, and there have been wins. I mean,
I think Extinction Rebellion gets credited with the fact that the UK declared a climate emergency, I think, shortly after one of the big rebellions. I don't know if people do say that's a connection, that the UK was one of the first major countries in the world to declare a climate and ecological emergency. Do you feel that that the movement had something to do with that, or do you think it was just the time?
Oh no, I think we had something to do with that, for sure. Because I was in those meetings with the Labour Party who tabled the motion, right?
But there's probably
it was a really brave thing that some of the Labour Party leaders did. You know. I'm sorry, you were saying.
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say there's probably disappointment because with that declaration, we're wondering what were the actions, where were the actions to follow up on that if we are in an emergency.
It's been really telling for me, like as a politician. I think that's when I just surrendered my, to my kind of any kind of faith I had in the system as it is, to know the so declaring a climate emergency and things just continuing to get worse, upshoots in the carbon production of this country and of many other Western countries, and those measurements around our pollution and our contributions to the suffocation. I just want to be, there's this scientific ways to talk about this, and then for me there's visceral ways, right? So like we're suffocating ourselves, we're suffocating the oceans, we're suffocating our air. So that's actually accelerated. So what is this climate emergency? And yet still there has been we talk about this Overton window, this mass consciousness, and that has been shifted. Most people do know there's an issue, there's a climate and ecological issue. They don't know what it means. Some of them, but some people don't know what that means. Not really, because we do this thing, where we talk through the scientific lens, and they're like, and it's about carbon in the atmosphere and carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and it's like, what does that? And we talk about warming, like 2 degrees. Well, I want a warmer, I want to live in a warmer country in the UK, and it just doesn't, right? It doesn't mean anything, because we're so limited by our vocabulary when you're even half academic in your thinking.
And it's connected with the relationships that actually sustain our lives, the pollinators. And if you alter things slightly, you destroy this whole web of food production, all these ecosystem services from the trees absorbing carbon. All of a sudden, they can't do that anymore. All of a sudden, they're releasing
more carbon than they're taking in when we destroy. So I think, and it almost seems intentional that's left out of the language, because if we really understood what 1 degrees or 2 degrees meant, we would be horrified. I mean, most people would probably be horrified. But because it's so abstract, it's left as just a number.
Which is very abstract.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I was thinking about this recently, Jessica, because I was thinking about, when I come into a relationship with the earth, she's not just the earth, she's not just Gaia. Thank you, James Lovelock. But it's like, this thing that one of our elders, Theo Cassing, Ghost Tours, talks about with this, what the language, the English language does. It does this abstract thing where everything's a noun. And we've lost our verbing, we've lost our relationship in it, right, to it. So like, we call it the planet, we call it the earth, we call it the right? Mm-hmm. It's like something. But if I really, in my morning prayers, what I'm actively doing and have been doing for a while now is going, she's my mother. She's my mother. Right? She sustains every part of me. Right? She's not, there's nothing abstract in my relationship there. I walk on her chest every day. Right? I suckle from her breasts every day. Right? Her waters, I take her waters through me every day. Right? She's my mother. I breathe her, I inhale her every day. you know? So it's like, oh, and I'm feeling like, and this is what happens to me when I enter into that prayer, you know, I'm like, this is a relationship. This isn't some abstract thing. And that's what it is about for me now, you know, just trying to not trying really being in that relationship.
Yeah, beautiful. It's so easy not to think about that every moment, but it is absolute truth. That is.
Okay. Well, before we close, I wanted to ask a couple more questions about XR, and I know it's a decentralized movement. So I'm wondering, do you ever worry about, or have you ever experienced, people who might be infiltrating and being destabilizing the movement because it's so open? You know, it happens with many protest movements where people come in with the intention of destabilizing or trying to get the public against that. And how do you deal with that? How do you cope with the threat of that?
It's real what you've named. It's really real. I don't think you can control it, or I think that we could get, and this is with the being the change work, we are holding it in great awareness, actually, because it's a safety issue, right? And if you recognize it as a genuine safety issue, a complex safety issue, then it's about how you create the conditions that could keep you more safe, right? And keep everyone, it's for the safety of everybody, right? So in ignoring it, there's a negligence. And I think to some extent we ignored it. Or to a great extent, we ignored that. And I regret that, because I think we have been infiltrated, and I think there's great confusion actually in the movement, and I think it's one of the reasons there's confusion. So in this new iteration of being the change work, there's a very deliberate and conscious attempt to, and I just want to thank Kofi for our elder, our Ghanaian elder, for really holding us around that, because it's a safety issue. Yeah. So there's processes that we need to put in place around that we've learned something about, Jessica, is what I'm saying, the hard way.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to say about what's coming up for Extinction Rebellion in 2022? Any actions you'd like to point out, or any ways that people in different countries can get involved if we don't have an XR chapter here in Dominica? So what are get
in touch with XRISN globally, folks. Get in touch with our International Solidarity Network. They have a website, right? Great work is coming through them. You can get in touch with us at Co-Liberation. Okay. There's an email I can give you to share if that helps. And at Being the Change Work, we're about to release all kinds of social media accounts, so you'll be able to find us too. There's an action on the April the 1st, a kindness action of washing. We did an action last September for Rebellion, an opening ceremony, where we chalk sprayed the Guildhall, which is the centre of the City of London. And we're going to be doing a water blessing there on April the 1st, which is my trial date. There's Rebellion that starts 2 weeks after that. So, you are more than welcome to that. And if you're somewhere there isn't an affinity group well, firstly, find out if there is an affinity group near you, because it's that community and the belonging and the togetherness that we all need, right, to be in this. And if there isn't there, and you're feeling this, then create one. Grab some best friends that know what your heart is feeling and can feel it with you, and create that adaptation group. It will be an adaptation group, right? Mm-hmm. And then think locally, be local in your, that would be my advice. And huge appreciation and gratitude for everyone doing that work already.
Thank you for that. I'm curious, you mentioned you have a trial date coming up. Is that for an arrest? Can you tell us about that? When were you arrested?
So the city of London built on an Roman amphitheatre, this central square. It's called the Guildhall Square. Mm-hmm. And the Guildhall is this opulent building, thousands of years, at least 2,000-year history there, built on a Roman amphitheatre where they had held slaves. And we designed an action which was about reweaving the human family, so that I could, and with others, scaled the Guildhall to the balcony, and we dropped a banner, co-liberation equals freedom together. And I spray painted to represent the blood that is on the hands of the City of London right now. It's still the greatest colonizer force. It is responsible for mass genocide and ecocidal economics. And we were asking that disobedience was our version of turning the money launderer's table over, right? And saying, stop the harm, heal the harm. And of course, I was arrested for the action. This was in September of 2021. And many people supported it. And we had the human family in an amphitheatre design. So I was protected by my white kinship sisters, right? And then there were brothers. And then there were rebels of all kinds. And then we had the co-founders of XR and our Black brothers and sisters who it's too dangerous, right? Who we know it's to be arrested that's not okay in this racist culture that we exist in. So it was about the human family acting in protection. Yeah. And it was very, very beautiful and quite frightening too. And we have, the trial, the case is on April the 1st. It's going to be heard on April the 1st in Westminster. And then we will be doing this beautiful sacred action.
Beautiful. Yeah. Wow. Well, Skeena, thank you so much. I mean, it's just been so amazingly rich and heart-centered, and I'm just amazed that when you share, you're just so open, and I'm really blown away. This is why we call this series Love in Action, because we're looking for people like you who are putting their love into action, not waiting for a change, but being that change, as you say in the title of the new work that's coming up. And as the series is for deep adaptation, and you've mentioned that you work with a number of the R's, and deep adaptation and Extinction Rebellion are quite closely knit. Is there anywhere, just before we close, where you disagree with any of the deep adaptation focus, which is really acknowledging that collapse of our industrial way of life is likely imminent or maybe underway? That's the foundational belief. Do you share that, or do your belief is that we can continue and change without a collapse?
I don't have a belief necessarily around any of it. I feel like this is a collapse. We are in collapse. I feel a collapse energy around me, in me, that I'm part of, right? And I see that, the indicators point to a huge probability for societal collapse, right? So I'm at peace with deep adaptation and what it's supposing. Yeah, I'm really in a deep peace with it, and more than that, I'm just really grateful to Jem and the many people that have, operated and acted out of their fierce love to talk about this, yeah, and I was deep, I remain and was deeply inspired by the relinquishment, restoration, resilience, and reconciliation, right? I'm deeply inspired that it's their visionary principles, and they really have informed the vision of Extinction Rebellion and my personal vision around the work. So yeah.
Well, thank you. Well, I hope our paths cross again, and I'm actually going to be doing the next course with Jem and Katie, so online.
Beautiful.
So I'm really looking forward to that starting next month. And
wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah.
I wish you great love and speed for that. And yeah, give them my love when you see them. Thank you. I'm really grateful to you, Jessica, for what you're doing and the conversation. It's just been really, well, just when you speak to someone where there is that shared sense of heart, thank you. That's been really special and precious.